So I want to talk about virtual reality. You know, like what is VR? I think a lot of people kind of like I think they know already. Virtual reality is kind of like very straightforward. It is basically transporting yourself into a whole different reality per se, which is virtual, which is not real. Anything that's not within the physical realm is virtually virtual. So, what's the thing about like how people are really utilizing VR nowadays? VR has been prevalent within the games industry, obviously. Games like Skyrim VR, Beat Saber, Rec Room, VR Chat. So all those things basically allows one to actually transport themselves into a virtual realm and to do whatever they want, more or less. You can socialize, you can play. There's also like remote work, virtual work as well, such as like Altspace or like what was it called, Spatial, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of these things talking about like VR, and I recall like last time in when the first Oculus DK1 came out, and people were really intrigued about like what's the future about VR and how VR is gonna be like taking over the gaming industry, that everybody will be playing games in VR. But that's not the case, right? That's not really the case. But it's not to say that it doesn't work per se. I had this view many years ago, as I still hold true to that, is that VR is not really a niche market, but has its own specific uses. That there are certain experiences that should be experienced in VR rather than other mediums or platforms and whatnot. Take for instance like I mentioned Skyrim per se. Skyrim was developed as a console or like PC keyboard mouse type of game. It's on the desktop game. So the interface was designed like that, the experience was designed like that, the whole mechanic of it, UI, UX, is all revolving around the way you use your keyboard and mouse and probably in the controller per se. So, but that in itself is already kind of like, it's already very immersive for a lot of people, myself included. I recall, I remember you would spend a lot of time not doing the story and just playing the game, just like adventuring, doing all of the million side quests that continues to pile up. Even though you finish one, there's another three more comes in. So, but then they try to port it into VR, and yeah, it kind of worked more or less because the immersive part of it is there. The whole being in the world of Skyrim, experiencing the world, experiencing everything what happens around us in the different cities, the different villages, environments and whatnot. But the mechanic of it, the UI of it was a bit, I'd say it's not exactly directly ported to a VR type of experience per se. They had to kind of like rework it, or like you had to figure out a better way of interacting with the UI, the inventory system, or the level up skills and whatnot. So that's just basically one example. There's a lot of examples how first person based games try to port into VR, but it wasn't really made for VR to begin with. They didn't really hit that right note, you know. It's not like Beat Saber or like Vader Immortals or like Half-Life Alyx really run the game on VR because they were made for VR. They were made in VR for VR specifically. So those kind of experiences, it's hard to play without VR. I mean, like the game is more or less there, but the experience is different. You know, so it's more about the experience. I'm trying to talk more about the experience. Virtual reality is all about experience. It's not just on the mechanic, not just on the UI, the visual, the storytelling. Everything has its place as well. All of it contributes, has a factor to the end goal as well. But the key element, what makes VR is a more profound different from any other platforms is that the experience is a lot more immersive, because the 6 degrees of freedom, you are strapped to the monitor directly on in front of your eyes. Anywhere that you look is a world, more or less. So you really feel literally like you are there in that particular virtual world, and that is something that you can't really get in other types of formats. But not to say that it's there to replace any other platforms, more or less. It's not to say like I'm not playing any desktop games. I won't be reading books anymore. I won't watch movies in the cinemas or whatnot. No, you would still. There are certain stories. There are certain experiences that are best viewed in the cinema, right? There's action-packed movies, Transformers movies or whatnot, that really utilizes the ambience sound within the acoustics of a cinema setting. That that kind of experience is not replicatable when you're viewing the same movie at home, per se. When you're watching on a 43-inch TV or whatnot with your own speaker, or even if you have like Dolby speakers just to recreate, but it won't be exactly the same, you know. So that's how the directors basically have to kind of like design it for that use case scenario. That's their end platform. So all of these content creators, they always create for the end goal. Writers write for books depending on how big is the book and how is the format of the medium itself. So it's different, the story when we told in words, as opposed to when it's told in like TV series or telemovies, or even like movies with serial formats, that like the MCU per se. So it is technically the same story, but it's a different experience, right? Like Lord of the Rings, or Lord of the Rings has its movie, came from books. It has its games. It has its virtual desktop games. It has its tabletop games, and all of that is basically revolving around this more or less the same subject matter, but it's a different experience altogether. It's a different style. It's a different experience. It's a different feeling when you experience all these different mediums. So that's basically what VR is as well. VR is another form of experience where you are experiencing the technically the existing story, or the same purposes, but in a different form, and in itself raises newer forms of enjoyment, raises newer ways of entertainment, newer ways of storytelling, where you don't have a cameraman to specifically show you what you're supposed to see. Whereas in VR, in 360 videos or films, you are the cameraman, and you get to decide where you want to watch, what you want to watch, when you want to watch. For instance, like there's like certain experiences that to show how's life in say in the war-ridden part of the Middle East. So somebody brought a 360 camera there, and people will try that out within a VR headset. So when you are in a 360 environment film, you would see there are things happening all around, but there is nobody stopping you to like literally look anywhere you want at any given point in time. So there will be something happening in front of you, and there will something happen to the right, at the back, at the back or front or whatnot, and it's up to you where you want to see it. So it proves a different challenge for content creators to kind of like attract your attention, to make sure that you are looking at what they want you to look at, because they literally cannot hold your head and like force you to watch, or you're supposed to watch this and then you watch this and then this happens and then this happens. In 360 you don't get them to do to control that. Things would happen, but users, if it's not enticing enough for them, if it's not attractive enough for them, that they won't see it. They will just look at that, okay, something has happening, and then like something is happening over there, but nobody's telling them that they're supposed to look there. So it's a challenge for content creators who's not exposed to the media and have the basic understanding of how virtual spaces work, and developing for virtual 360 types of film and whatnot. So it opens up a whole different way of understanding film and storytelling and whatnot, even in games as well, 3D games as well. Like I mentioned, come back to Skyrim, when there's like when you're in VR, think there you would be a lot easier to just look up in the sky, find the dragon flying over, compared to using your mouse or the controller and whatnot. It's a lot easier, it's a lot more intuitive because it's second nature to you. It is natural for you to move your head around to look at anything. So that's the thing basically that you don't get in other types of format, and that's why I feel strongly about like how VR is a really 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 strong medium in itself, but it is not there to, how should I say this, it's not to dim out the other mediums or whatnot. AR has its place, VR has its place, MR, film, TV, series, streaming, on demands, all of this, we are so we are so allowed of these different ways of consuming content nowadays. It's basically just up to us to kind of like choose which one it is that you want to feel. For some people, like for me, when I want to play games, I want to be casual. I want to be sitting back, like just chill. I don't want to like really go out there and just like do that for like 3 hours straight. Like it's not that I don't see Beat Saber is something really enjoyable. I really enjoy Beat Saber, but you would not enjoy Beat Saber in like an hour straight. For a lot of people, that will not be enjoyable for them. That's why the leveling system in Beat Saber is based on music durations, right? One music, which is basically one stage. So in between you can just sit down, chill and whatnot, and then okay, I'm good for the next round and whatnot. So it's not the same when you are already sitting down in front of your PC or in front of your console, sitting down on the couch. It's a different experience. So that's why the game design of it is different. Similarly, when you're talking about AR, when you have a phone and one on your hand, and the game like Pokemon Go and whatnot, they have to consider that the user is basically walking, looking around stuff. They have things in the real world that would be distracting to them, but they are still focusing on their phones. So they have to consider that as well for the whole wholesome experience. So that is a very interesting study as well. Come mixed reality as well. When people are using the HoloLens, it's still augmented reality, but you have understanding of the spatial space more or less. So that in itself allows a whole different ways of interacting and interaction as well. How it comes with all of these things. It understands the room that you are in, the space that you are in, and how you want to utilize those information to enhance whatever world that you are in. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about actually, but I want to just focus on VR in this particular session more or less. But because I studied VR for quite some time, I studied VR back in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, in my second year in my degree, creative multimedia, majoring in virtual reality. Back then in 2005, there was virtually no market for VR developers. There was no VR market per se. My 3D was based for real-time base, so it's a low poly base, so it's not good enough for 3D animations. So they would say my work was kind of like half done, but in reality it was done to accommodate real-time rendering, which at that time is really something new. So it warms my heart to see like nowadays there's more. VR has become a lot more mainstream. People know VR. They have VR devices, at least like not mainstream, but you have a wider range of audience that have VR devices nowadays, and movies like Ready Player One and whatnot, they kind of like show the potential of it, the good and the bad of it. But it is an interesting time, how I see, because a lot of these movies, their story, it is a kind of like it's a dystopian take. They show kind of like how there is that possibility where like everybody just be constantly hooked on to virtual worlds and they're not disconnected to the physical world. So that as developers, they have to consider as well to not make the game as addicting as it could be. But who knows, right? At this point, because of the technology, it's not, people can still tell it's still virtual. We would probably be, we would reach to a point where you can't really tell anymore, you know, that you are going into that uncanny valley of like what's real and what's not. So when that time comes, then you have to make a choice on how you want to develop your content. So that's an ethical choice. But VR in itself opens up a lot of like discussions, a lot of topics, a lot of study, a lot of like, it is a very interesting thing for me to just talk and ramble about how I really love VR experiences, VR games, VR stories. It's really interesting, and I would love to talk more, but I think it's already like quite a lot of content I are talking about here. But I hope that you understand like what VR is all about, more or less. It's all about like being there, being in a different world, being in a different place, being in a different time. So usually people, when they create VR, they would create something that you cannot have in physical world. In the real life, you cannot have. Why would you recreate something that's already accessible in the world in VR, where you can literally just go there physically? Right, that doesn't make sense unless you are adding something to it, you are adding value to it, you are adding some content that you cannot access in the real world. If you're not doing that, then why VR at all, right? So that's why I said VR is a specific need. It has a specific it is for specific need, for specific type of experience. So I will always tell people, if you're doing VR, always ask the question back, why VR? Why must this story be told in VR? Why must this game be experienced in VR? Can't this particular experience be experienced in other platforms? What if it's just a TV? What if it's just an ad? What if it's an actual game or a desktop game? Would it achieve the same objectives, achieve the same impact? If it doesn't, then don't. As simple as that. So try to basically justify why you're doing VR, because VR in itself has a lot of potential, and when it actually targets that particular objective, that is an experience you will never get in other forms of media or platforms or whatnot. And I would say, especially in the healthcare industry. Sorry. Huh?
Where is Ken?
Ken is there.
Oh.
Okay, cut. Really. Where was I? Oh, damn it. At least you would talk. So VR is for specific needs. It's not exactly for everything per se. There are certain experiences that is best experienced in VR, and there are certain problems can be solved with VR. Take like in the healthcare, in aviation, in mechanical engineering, people are designing cars in VR. People are creating buildings, architecture, interior design in VR. People are trying to solve remote patients using VR. So that's a lot of things that's in real case scenarios that VR is actively helping people. And it's not just like I said, it's not just limited to entertainment or gaming and whatnot. There's a lot more. So try to open your eyes on VR and the potential of it in the future. There's a lot more actually you can do with this, right? And until then, I guess I'll see you guys soon. See you.